Marvel Snap Part 7. We're going to go over avatar, card art changes, and a little bit about fields and what's coming up next. Okay, so we have this is where we're at. We have our little avatar selection screen where you can put an image, select what kind of avatar you have. We just say Kitty, join the match, the same as always. Let's see, let's do this one. Sweaty dude. Okay. Let's. Okay, so we ready up. Let me see. Okay, so we have Kitty versus Sweaty Dude. And I added a lot more cards. Not cards, field effects. So you have different fields, and we don't know what it is until we put it in there. This one is probably it cuts the power in half. And let me see. So this one, 8/8. I'm not sure what it does. So all of these right now, I have them all working. There's no reason for me to dive deep into each one. I just know that the effects work, and I have a low cool timer. Let me see, just to make sure that the cards are working, networked. The other thing that I want to show you before the game ends is that when I grab this card, it shows it above everything else. So the sorting order. So that's pretty cool. So now it will tell me who won. Kitty won with 3 points. Congrats. So I gotta change it so that Kitty won instead of congrats. Well, it says congrats to Kitty anyways, but and that's it. There's a game loop. Let's see. There's an error here that I have to figure out. It's probably trying to delete something. Yep. Remove listeners. So we probably don't need to remove that. Yeah. If there's still a game manager, we'll remove the listener. But for the most part, we have. Let me show you where from last time. Okay, last time I put in the comments that I fixed some things with the network card. So in here we had some problems. I'm not sure where it was, but I remember that we had some assigned. The second player was trying to do things that they couldn't, and so it was causing errors, and it didn't allow this to complete. You have to be careful on this setup to make sure that all the variables that you need to set up are set correctly and that you're accessing them at the right time. So that's why sometimes I like to make the editor the second player, is to double check, make sure the first and the second player both are getting the right information. So that's something good to do for debugging multiplayer game. Let me show you what I did for the avatar. The avatar was actually pretty straightforward. And I used ChatGPT. Show you what I did. So I asked it, I need to create an avatar database. Just like the scriptable object that I did with the cards. And I needed to get the sprite ID, and I spelled it wrong, but it still caught it. Will display sprites from the database. Okay, so it gave me the database scriptable object. I just had to change this to card game instead of just game. And for the most part, it worked. And then we have this browser UI that I didn't change anything at all. And then after that, I said, okay, perfect. Now every time the browser updates, I need player data scriptable object to store the ID of the chosen one. And so I gave him the scriptable object for the player data to say, hey, this is the object that needs to store the avatar sprite. And so then it gave me that with that reference. And so that's pretty neat. I didn't have to do much. It's in here. I go in the projects and I show you here. I have all the information here, the data. These are the images. So if I wanted to save, and if I wanted to create another avatar image, I just have to add, name it, and then change it here. And that's all it is. And if I wanted to create a system where players buy their icon or their avatar icon, or they get it through a reward or a backend or whatever in-game currency you have, I would set up another data object that would hold this information. This is good for database, right? And then I would set up another object for that will hold the IDs of every avatar icon that I own and save it on a backend. So that way, instead of sifting through these, I would use the owned IDs to determine which one they want and use this to grab all the images. Okay, so then you could separate this logic so that way you can sell more of these or use them as a reward system. Okay? That's how you go about expanding this. But for now, this is perfect and it's totally usable and adjustable. Um, and I love how it adds the listeners, so I don't have to think about it, drag and drop. That's always nice. What I don't like doing this all the time is because this is almost like a transformer, in my opinion. When you have functions that add themselves to buttons, it's hard to then debug to know what's clicking what because you don't see it. Even if you look at runtime, you don't see the listener in there. So let me show you what I mean. So see how this adds as a listener? You look in here in the next button. See, there's nothing here. And when you hit play and I look at the button, there's nothing here, but it is working. So this on click thing for the next and the previous button are empty. Um, and so it's hard to debug sometimes. So I don't like adding things at runtime or things that like add themselves at runtime because then you have to like keep track of the code and where it is. And so I'm a visual guy and I like to um, make sure everything's working. And so for the purpose of this, this is totally fine. It's just one. It's just right there. But you would have to document it to make sure that is known. And it's also like within. It's obvious that this browser is adding the buttons, like so it's not too far off. But if you had imagine having all the buttons and everything every time it spawns the fields and they add themselves and you have buttons and everything's adding itself to other things, it can get pretty hectic. Anyway, so that's just a pet peeve of mine. It's not a huge thing. And then let's see. Then we have the cards. So in here we have all these. Now we made all these cards. They don't have any effects. Um, and they have, you notice these card base that I haven't even touched yet. These are in case you wanted to do crazy marble snap stuff like particle events, rarities, abilities. This one's the one we're gonna have to do to figure out. But we're not gonna do yet. Um, but I set up the power so that we can actually test the different cards. And then in here, if we look at the prefab, we change the card visual. And I'll add my own stock images so I can share this with you guys because obviously I can't share this one. But I'll give you guys a link below to the tutorial from some guy that went over the Marble Snap setup for some of the cards or how they try to imitate the setup. So I just kind of follow some of that to create the hierarchy. And the main thing you have to make sure is this sorting group has to be in the right order. Because it can get pretty hectic between all the layers and the background. So you want to make sure that this one at the top is set to the correct layer that you want. And then you want to do some buffer. It's almost like Photoshop where you have layers and masks. And in this one, so for example, the main thing is the frame break because depending on how much break you want to see. So if I set it to 1, it goes below the name. If I want it above that, if I go 0, it goes because it's the C fighting, right? So it's below with the image. So And then to get the background is a little bit farther back, you can always set it to whatever Z distance you want to get the um and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. You can also add animations and particles to make it all look cool. That's up to you. But all this in here, you can set it up in this presenter. So when I set the card, I could add more in here to change the image, which we'll do eventually. Which I just don't have any different images. Um, what I did do in here, if you look at when I start, so when I select the card, I change the group order to 3, and that sets the card above everything else because all the other cards are at 2. And that's what gives me that nice effect of like when I grab a card, it goes over all the UI. So there's nothing that's above it. So that's a nice way to, when you get bugs where your card is going through other images, especially in a 2D game, this sorting group is what will help you make sure things are in the right layer. And then when I let go of the card, I put it back in layer 2. So that way I'm not dropping cards and putting it up a layer higher. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Then the fields. One thing with the network fields, prefab. Oh no, because this is a multiplayer. The fields are multiplayer. We have the layout first, and we have all these functions that we talked about, or the booleans that we talked about last time. We go in here. I created all of them now. So we have all the different variations in here. With different timing and adjustments. That's what you saw earlier. And I tested them and they work. The main thing that I did not do is the moving cars from zone to zone because I have to come up with a structure that doesn't break the game and it's scalable. So I need to make sure because we don't keep track of where these zones are at. So in here we have these spots. These are not any type of quadrant or anything. So I have to set up a quadrant system where when I click on it, I know that that's what I'm selecting, and that's where if there's a card, I have to figure out if there's a card there or if there's not. And moving cards, readjusting, kind of like what we do with the hands. The hand, when you let go of the hand, it like reshuffles. So I need to make sure that either I gotta talk to my friend to see what we want to do at this point. In if you're a developer and you're making a game with a group of people, this is where you need to communicate with your team or the lead or whoever's in charge of the game. Or if you're in charge of the game, you have to think about these things. It's like, okay, how are we going to do things? uh, and it's okay to be wrong. It's just you need to understand the implications, and the developer has to make the decisions of, okay, we're going to do this, but we got to understand that if this fails, we still need to be able to adjust and pivot. So we need to be flexible enough, but also like not waste time. So I'm trying to be strategic about how I approach this issue because I went in and I was like, okay, I'm gonna make sure you can drag and drop everywhere. But that is not the best solution because then we are in a network scenario where the other player, um, has controls. Right now, the first player is the one that spawns all the cards. So I have to switch that to the second player, and then we have to keep track of who's what. And then when we delete all the cards, and so we'll have to see which way we go. But that's at the end. At the end of after I make all the other things and the effects, we'll figure out how to move cards. So the next video is gonna be we're gonna go over the deck builder. And the same way we did the avatar and the name, we're going to save the information of which deck the player chose and use that deck to play. And hopefully by then we'll have different art styles so that you can see the different cards and see the different decks. And then after that, we'll do the player effects with some cool stuff that I've learned from Unity sample projects, and then we'll make the cards move. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. If you're stuck somewhere, or if you feel like there's something that I'm missing, If you need help finishing your game, I have a community to help developers finish their games. We'll see you on the next video.